Hello? I already reviewed that album. Oh, We tend to think of sequel albums as being a trend of the last 20 or so years. And it is true that they proliferated, especially after Meatloaf did Bat Out of Hell 2, and that album was a massive success. But really, people have been making them for decades. And the two Preservation albums are pretty good examples of that. Heck, you could even in some ways consider Act 2 a sequel album to Act 1. Even though they're arguably two parts of the same thing, just released at separate times. In any case, Act 2 was released in 1974, about a year after Act 1, and contains the main plot of the rock opera that Ray Davies was trying to produce here. Like its predecessor, it received mediocre to bad reviews, but is often considered to be moderately better than Act 1. So let's find out. One of the first things you will notice is that this album went to the Joe's Garage school of rock opera plot development. Namely, there are several non-song exposition drops situated strategically throughout the album. This one informs us that apparently in the intervening time since Act 1, Mr. Flash has now become dictator and leader of the government, and Mr. Black is now organizing a people's army to revolt against him. The first actual song on this album is pretty good. It's sung from the perspective of the tramp, and describes his trepidation and dread at the oncoming war between Mr. Black and Mr. Flash. This song is quite good as well, a cry to revolution from Mr. Black, who is in hiding. And it debuts some themes that you better get used to because they reoccur throughout this album. Money Talks is great too, featuring more of the glammy pomp that we saw occasionally on Act 1, and we'll be getting much more of on here. Lyrically describes Flash's ethos. He believes anything can be bought and sold, no one has any values, so in his view, money rules the world. I've personally never seen anything like it before. The crowd of around, what, 30,000
And so, after only 3 songs, we get another announcement.
And I failed to mention, these take the form of faux news reports, where the reporter's talking about a speech that Mr. Black is giving, segueing into the next song. This song is pretty good. I like the main melody. It's oddly clunky, but I think it works overall. But the lyrics confuse me a little bit. It's supposed to be a speech in which Mr. Black discusses how he's going to wipe out all of the filth and vermin and bring religion and righteousness back to the people. Now, I thought this guy was supposed to be like some sort of Marxist. Whatever happened to the opiate of the masses? This song inaugurates perhaps the strangest aspect of Act 2, namely the fact that after treating Mr. Flash as a malevolent boogeyman during the last third of Act 1, we now focus on his inner thoughts and emotions in a way that we haven't before. And it is revealed that he's just as flawed and human as everyone else. Musically, the song is alright, but I especially like the music hall-esque passage in the middle.
For if I cut myself, I bleed, and if I catch a cold, I sneeze. Have I not eyes to help me see? Have I not lungs to help me breathe? Have I not hands, organs?
Secondhand Car SPIV is great as well, describing the rags to riches story of a slum kid who rose up to become wealthy and powerful. And I'm not really sure whether the song is supposed to be about Mr. Flash. Its placement makes me think it is, but it's never specified whether Flash is the SPIV or not. And there are little musical cues that make me think that that might be the case, like the little reprise of the intro to Here Comes Flash towards the end of the song. He's Evil is fantastic. Possibly my favorite thing on either of these two albums. It's got a great kind of hard rock riff, the horns are great, and the operatic vocals are used to wonderful effect. And the melody of the song will stay stuck in your head for days. It's supposed to be a propaganda broadcast by Mr. Black and his cronies, warning the people of the nation of the evils of Mr. Flash. Mirror of Love is very appealing musically, which makes it all the more unfortunate that Ray's vocal here employs an absolutely ridiculous sounding vibrato that makes it impossible for me to take the song seriously. And additionally, I do have to sort of question why Ray is even singing this song. The song introduces us to the fourth main character of Act 2, Belle, the lead mistress of Mr. Flash. And all the other songs that this character sings on the album are sung by a female vocalist. So why did Ray sing this one in particular? It's just another announcement. Battle lines are being drawn. The two opposing armies have converged. All-out war has begun. Nobody Gives sees the Tramp once again saying that he doesn't understand what people are fighting about. He just wants to do his own thing and bemoaning the current state of the world. And it's the longest thing on the album. And in the middle section, they revisit the themes of World War II and British sacrifice. I mean, the Kinks already said everything there was to say about that on Mr. Churchill Says on Arthur. I don't quite understand the point of revisiting it, although I do like the more upbeat later section of the song. I don't like this song at all. Not because it has somebody besides Ray singing on it. I think the female vocalist is fine. I would perhaps have actually liked to hear more of her on this album. But because this is the first overtly fillerish track that we've heard thus far. This adds very little to the plot and basically just reinforces things that we knew already. War is raging, everybody's up in arms, nobody's loving anymore. This song is where the album gets really, really weird. Basically, on the eve of battle, Mr. Flash has a premonition of defeat in which he is confronted by his soul, who condemns him for destroying the village green and his other selfish actions over the course of the last two albums. Basically, this is the same idea Pink Floyd would do much better 5 years later on The Wall, but it's much more psychedelic than The Trial as well. So much so that at times I even expect Arthur Brown to bust in singing about how he's the god of hellfire. This song is pretty good as well. They reprise the intro to Here Comes Flash again, as Flash, defeated in battle, and now on the run, confesses his various crimes. And it's not really much else to say here. Fallen from battle and fleeing for his life, Mr. Flash goes to Belle, who he asks to shelter him, and who turns him away, saying that things have changed. And I did not make this criticism in Act 1, although I could have. This has young and innocent days from Arthur. This is just young and innocent days, rewritten to be about a man and a woman looking back on a relationship that failed, as opposed to an old man looking back on happier days in his life. Did this really need to be here? Did they really think that we were too dense to tell that Mr. Black had seized power after Flash's confession? I mean, how would it be if instead of telling you my thoughts on a track? Hello, this is Herman Krontz from WGX21344122357, the news source that you can trust. I hold in my hand an unconfirmed report alleging that John does not like this gag in the Kinks Preservation Act 2 and plans on filming a sketch mocking it later in the day. We go now to Donna in the finance department to inform us of the latest economic developments. That's not very good, is it? Artificial Man is probably my second favorite song on this album. The first half is basically just a dark reprise of I'm Your Man from Act 1, where Mr. Black details how he plans to create a race of artificial people without original thoughts or emotions, and using Flash as the very first test subject of this new master race of men, and how he will build an antiseptic world in which no one will know suffering or want, but there will also be no free will. SCRAPHEAP City details Belle waiting around to be carried off or killed by Mr. Black's goons, who are going around wiping out anything that doesn't fit into his brave new world, which apparently includes killing all the animals except for the ones in zoos. So I don't know how much longer there will be a world. The music is okay. It's countryish and kind of fillerish. It reminds me of Happy Trails or the Beach Boys.
Well, East Coast girls are hip, I really dig those styles they wear.
Or the Beach Boys ripping themselves off a year before this album was released.
Get yourself a nap, get yourself a nap, get yourself a nap.
Hello again. Welcome back to WGGB 1234441272111, the only government-sponsored truthful news source. We would like to inform you that the strictest limitations are to be placed on everything and anything pertaining to fun, entertainment, and other dangerous, unmoral activities by order of our Chief Minister, the Lord Davis. That will be all. This is a fitting album closer. It's supposed to represent the new People's National Anthem of Black's new dictatorship. And it reprises several themes found throughout both acts. But to tell you the truth, I'm just happy it's over. Preservation Act 2 is decent to okay. It's about the same quality as Act 1, although the highlights are slightly higher here, so it may be a little better depending on what you think of the storyline. But because it was a double album, there is some filler, and I suspect strongly that if Ray had been able to finish this album and have it all be one double album as opposed to one single album, one double album, it probably would have been much better, because Preservation Act 1 is about a third of an album's worth of really, really good songs, and about a third of the songs on here are really forgettable. Now, as to the actual main thrust of it, the rock opera bit, the fact is that I just don't like this story very much. And it's not because I don't understand it. I understand exactly what Ray was trying to say here. But it's not a particularly original point of view, you know. newsflash, both communism and capitalism oppress the people and don't solve human issues.
Sod off, slag. Communism is perfect.
Disregarding that, I also don't find the middle way that Ray proposes of sort of the traditionalism of the rural England that never was to be particularly convincing. But that's enough of the politics. There are little things on this album that annoy me as well, like the announcements as an exposition device, and the fact that there are 4 distinct main characters on this album, and Ray Davies voices all but one, and even that character, he sings one song. Why couldn't he have gotten Dave or hired another singer to do it? You know, there was no reason he couldn't have, and it would have made this album much easier to understand. Now, there are rock operas where I'm not a big fan of the plot line, but I do like the album as a whole. Controversially, I feel this way about both Tommy and The Wall. And this is sort of one of them. Now, in terms of which of the two do I prefer, that's a really, really tough one. Because like I said, Act 1 functions better as a separate album because it's not really as connected to the plot line, but Act 2 has better songs. Really, it's a toss-up, but I would have to say maybe Act 1, because Act 1 at the end of the day is the Kinks is early 70s Kinks on autopilot, whereas Act 2 is them trying something really big and stumbling in a big way. All in all, as a whole, Preservation is just not particularly good. It's not bad either, though. I'm not quite sure why these albums have their reputation as the absolute nadir of the Kinks' entire career, but I could not disagree more with that. I think for what they are, these 2 albums are all right. But it is a shame. The projects that don't work and arguably weren't good ideas to begin with very often seem to be the ones that the creators cared about most. Frank Zappa seems to have legitimately really thought Thingfish was good and one of the best things he had ever made. And Preservation is very much like that. Ray obviously cared a lot about this project and really wanted it to succeed, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't come together as a cohesive whole. You have a okay album that mostly isn't related at all to the storyline, and you have an okay to mediocre rock opera.
Hello, it's me again. I represent the Bureau of Morality, Truth, and Correct Thinking. The Kinks' Preservation albums are dangerously subversive. They do not reflect American values. They do not reflect Christian values. They are vile, perfidious, obscene trash and should be listened to by no one. If you must engage in the activity of listening to music in direct defiance of the orders of the Almighty, I recommend you listen to something clean and wholesome and government approved, like Joe's Garage.